the two announcements. Tonight we're going to be carrying on our theme of light in the darkness. So light in the darkness. So this is our kind of 6th or 7th week. So what the Dharma says about responding to dukkha. So what tools the Dharma gives us to responding to suffering on all sorts of different levels. And we've been going through, we've got these 4 approaches that we've been going through. So we've got the wisdom approach, the heroic approach, the compassionate approach, and then coming next week, I think, is the hardline approach. But before we go to the hardline approach, what we're going to do tonight is hear from three people, 3 short talks, describing in a little bit more personally how these approaches can be used in life, in one's life. So the 3 speakers are going to be Mark, Paranita and Aryadasa. And the brief is, well, explore your own experience of responding to dukkha. So that's quite a challenging brief, but just say that. So I just really want to thank all of us for dwelling in that, because yeah, there's a lot of kind of gold and wisdom and learning that can be shared from someone to do that, and it is quite challenging to do. So I'm really looking forward to these short talks. So first of all, we're going to have Mark.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me? Good. Okay, yeah, so my talk's going to be on the the compassionate approach to suffering. 2 fairly sort of major sort of instances of suffering. I've given you all a handout, so for the benefit of the people at home, I'll read it out. So this is Bante's poem, The Unseen Flower. The compassion is far more than emotion. It is something that springs up in the emptiness, which is when you yourself are not there. So that you do not know anything about it. Nobody, in fact, knows anything about it. If they knew it, it would not be compassion. But they can only smell the scent of the unseen flower that blooms in the heart of the void. So straight away there, that's my disclaimer, actually. That's my caveat. I haven't got a clue what I'm talking about. I don't know. I don't even think that I know. So if we get to the end of this talk and nobody knows what I've been talking about, well, that's pretty good. We haven't done too bad. So yeah, instances of suffering then. So about 2012, I started up a little group up here at the Buddhist Centre called 298 Compassion in Action. And that was in response to the crisis in Syria, in particular with children caught up in conflict. And a group of us decided to do street collections, that sort of thing, in order to raise money and awareness for the charity War Child. So quite a few members of the Sangha did that with me. We got involved with a school, and the school did a play which toured other schools. Kids did flash mobs in the city centre. We put kids' artwork on display in the winter gardens, that sort of thing. Did this for a couple of years running. 1 year we even had live music, which was Sangha Gita, which was really beautiful. And it culminated with a trip to the camp in Cali, the jungle, the infamous camp there. At that time, I think it was around about 2015, 2014, 2015. There were about 10,000 people there. So it was pretty major. Now, the response from the Sangha was absolutely brilliant. Very generous. We filled a van full of stuff. We had about £1,200 in cash to go and spend as well. And I went there with my brother, and we spent a few days on the camp, helping out, distributing the material, and buying building materials, buying cooking materials, that sort of thing, cooking equipment. All very good, a good response to suffering. But on the way home, on the ferry on the way home, I realised that I'd had enough, and this manifested in quite an ugly way, actually. So I was sitting having my breakfast on the ferry, and a group of guys came in a bit loud, so I didn't like them immediately. One of them nudged me as I was eating my breakfast. To be fair, he did it 3 times, and I left him in no doubt that he shouldn't do it a 4th time. As these words came out of my mouth, I was shocked. Myself, I was shocked. I didn't know where these words had come from, but it was clear that there was something not quite right with me. The air was not scented with the unseen flower. It was something much fouler than that. So I decided that, I'd had enough. I couldn't do any more of that sort of thing, and I had to leave it alone. So it really quite badly affected. I almost stopped coming to the centre, actually. For about 6 months, I had very little contact with the centre. So, for 2 years, I didn't really do anything. And then in the space of about a week, 2 people in separate instances said, we think you'd be pretty good at prison chaplaincy. So I thought, well, I better look into that. And to cut a long story short, that's what I've been doing for the last 4 years. I go into prisons. I visit 5 prisons as a Buddhist chaplain. On my rounds of these 5 prisons, I see at the minute currently about 90 registered Buddhists, looking after them and their needs. But besides that, I have to do quite a lot of statutory duties as well. I'm part of a multi-faith team. So I have to see guys that are on suicide watch, that sort of thing. I'm often the person that tells people about bereavements in their family or friends, and they're stuck inside, offering them support with that. I accompany them on Zoom funerals. They're not allowed out at the minute because of the pandemic. Zoom compassionate last visits to people that are terminally ill, those sorts of things. I have to visit solitary confinement, which is called segregation. Actually, I shouldn't really call it solitary these days. And I work with a group of guys in one prison that are in recovery from addiction as well. And I've been doing that for 4 years. So that's quite a lot of suffering can, come up in the course of a day, let alone the last 4 years. But my mental states, I have to say now, are a mile away from what they were on that ferry on the way back from Calais. Despite what sort of goes on and despite being immersed in this for 4 years. So what's the difference? And I had to think about this difference and explore it to give this talk. It's not that the response to Calais was flawed. It was a good response, and it's worth responding to suffering wherever you see it anyway. Don't wait till you think that you're perfect to do it, just respond. But I think, looking back on it, that what happened was, with me, that a lot of what drove me, a lot of what I got my energy from was actually ill will towards border guards, politicians, and that kind of thing. Anger, and that was the energy that drove me along. But anger and ill will are things that come from the self. They don't come from anywhere else. They can't come from anywhere else. It just comes from the self. And the self is a limited idea. And so if you're giving from this idea of a self, you're going to be depleted. You'll run out of energy sooner or later. It'll bite you. And it did me. So don't get me wrong. When I'm in prison, I do get tired. I do suffer as well. And this manifests itself as like clock watching, that kind of thing. I can't wait to get home. I'm thinking, it'll be all right when it's the weekend. I get told I've got to go and see so-and-so. And I think, not Mr. So-and-so again. I don't want to go and see him. When I notice that happening, also the day really drags. When I notice that happening, I think, that's me giving from me. That's me thinking that it's me that's got to do all of this, And that's the little self again. So what I do in those situations is I go for my refuge. I go for refuge. I go to the practice, particularly metta. So I'm hoping that these days, that my response to the suffering that I come across is all from a base of metta. So we're told that, hopefully a lot of people will know this, that metta is a Brahma Vihara, a heavenly abode. And when metta meets suffering, compassion or karuna, another heavenly abode arises. This is coming out of that ocean that Padmasagara was on about the other week. I hope you listened to that talk. It's a great talk. The shoreless and deep ocean of Dharma. It's vast and it's limitless. Brahma Viharas are also known as the immeasurables. They're limitless. So when I go for refuge, I kind of get myself out of the way and allow something else to come in. And I can rely on that to sort of come up with what's needed in the situation. It doesn't mean to say that I sort of stand there and say, oh, you know, what you need is verse 420 of the Dhammapada, and that'll sort you out, or anything like that. Very often, you know, it's a bizarre kind of answer that comes up, but you can get yourself out of the way. The day goes quicker. I'm energized. So I just had my little peacock feather waved at me. So I'll just finish with an example of this. So I was in segregation one day, and the officers there told me that there was a guy there. He was naked, he wasn't eating, and he was off his head. So I thought, well, this is interesting. I'll go and see this guy. And opened his door, and sure enough, there he is in all his glory. And I say, what's going on? And he says, well, my pad's haunted. This is haunted. This cell is haunted. It's full of demons, and they're attacking me. I'm fighting them all the time. And I said, oh, okay. And he said, I've got one on my back. And he turned around. He didn't have anything on his back. And he said, it's a big one, isn't it? And it's biting me. It's hurting me. So this response came up, and it was, well, it looks cold. Why don't you put some clothes on, warm it up? And maybe it's hungry. Maybe that's why it's biting you. So why don't you start eating? Why don't you feed it? And he did. Now, much like those words on the ferry that came out of my mouth, and I didn't know where they come from, I really didn't know where these words came from. But perhaps the air was scented with the unseen flower. So the advice is respond to compassion, just respond to compassion anyway. But if you can, make sure you respond to suffering with compassion. Make sure you respond. And yeah, if there's any ill will there, just be aware of it and don't nudge me when I'm eating. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me okay at the back? Yeah. Okay, so my talk is going to be about the heroic approach. It's going to be about the practice of Kshanti, which Bodhinaga talked about a couple of weeks ago. So Kshanti, patient forbearance. So forbearance in the face of difficulty and suffering, in the face of dukkha. Okay, so the theme is when samsara lets us down. And in my life currently and in recent years, I've had quite a lot of challenges, some quite difficult things to deal with. So I've had bereavement, my mum died. I'm going through separation and divorce. I've had ill health, autoimmune disease, hip replacement surgery, the ill health of some of my children, and a life-changing betrayal by a close friend. So lots and lots of difficulty and uncertainty. And it's not just me. Of course, these are life things, and they happen to everyone. And lots of this has happened to come all at once for me in the past few years. And yeah, so I can honestly say that I've never been happier than I am now. I've never been happier, and I've never experienced more freedom, and I've never felt more confident than I do now. So yeah, and the difficulties haven't all gone, and everything's not sorted out. So what's going on? Like, am I mad, or am I just in denial? Yeah, and well, the Dharma says a really very radical thing. So the Dharma says that the problem isn't the external stuff, the things that are happening. It's our response to those things. That is the suffering. That's the dukkha. So I'm saying in terms of Kshanti that difficulties in life can be an opportunity for practice. So there can be an opportunity for growth and moving towards liberation. Because in times of difficulty, when it's really, really hard, when it's really, really tough, everything comes out to play, doesn't it? So it's like the whole system is going, no, this is not okay. This is not okay. I can't do this. I don't want this, and this should not be happening. And the Dharma says that it's that fight against reality that is the problem, that is the dukkha, that's the suffering. So the Kshanti approach, the heroic approach, is to turn that completely on its head, turn that upside down and embrace the difficulty as an opportunity and use it for spiritual development, to use it to our benefit. So this talk's going to mostly focus on working with difficult, strong emotions such as anger and hatred, because when we're let down and when we're betrayed and life betrays us and our loved ones get hurt, then we get filled with anger and we get really angry and we can even be filled with hatred. And Kshanti is forbearance in the face of those really strong emotions, those really difficult emotions. And it's not just patience. So it's not a small, soft, sentimental thing. It's not putting up with things, and it's not being a doormat. It's heroic, and it's really strong, radical empowerment. It's about taking responsibility, and it's about creating internal changes and taking charge of our own minds and our own emotions. So the Bodhicharya Avatara, Shantideva, we've mentioned a few times already, has a whole chapter on hatred and developing Kshanti because it's such an important thing. So Shantideva says about hatred, one's mind finds no peace, neither enjoys pleasure or delight, nor goes to sleep, nor feels secure, while the dart of hatred is stuck in the heart. So I'll just say that again. One's mind finds no peace, neither enjoys pleasure or delight, nor goes to sleep, nor feels secure while the dart of hatred is stuck in the heart. So we have to work to remove the hatred because we don't want to suffer. I don't want to suffer. I want to be happy. So it's a practice, and it's a practice of mind training. So one thing that I've done on really difficult days, the really hard days, my mind can be filled with repetitive, intrusive thoughts of blame and hatred. And they just keep coming. They just keep coming one after another. And a good practice that the Buddha recommended is to sort these thoughts out into two piles, unskillful, skillful. So the unskillful thought comes, an unskillful, painful thought, and I just can go, oh, that's going to lead to more suffering. I can put that down. A skillful, positive, pleasant thought can arise, and I know that will lead to happiness and freedom. So I can dwell in that thought, I can strengthen those kinds of thoughts. It's a very simple practice, very effective. And sometimes I can be filled with an urge to retaliate and to lash out and get my own back and get everybody on my side. And I can see that as an opportunity to develop Buddha pride in the precepts. So with determination, just going, I will not do that. I will not say that, because I know with certainty the truth of karma. If I act unskillfully, it's going to lead to my suffering and other people's suffering. I don't want to do that. I don't want to say, I want to be happy. Yeah. Okay, so part of Kshanti is bearing these painful emotions, anger and hatred, very painful states. And sometimes it's just sitting with it and watching it all moving through, all going through the body, real strong emotion, trying to feel it without acting it out like a huge volcano. And it's really hard work. It's hard work to do. So it needs to be supported with self-metta, lots of metta. It's really important. And we've all got different ways to develop metta. So for me, I've developed an attitude to meditation, which is, this is where I take my rest. This is where I look for ease. This is where I find nourishment. And this is where I enjoy pleasure in meditation. It's a treat. It's something I can enjoy. And another really radical practice when working with anger and hatred and developing Kshanti is to see a person that's hurt us as a precious teacher and develop compassion for them. Very radical practice, very, very strong practice. So the way that goes is, because of them, I've been given an opportunity for practice, and I will benefit and I will grow. And this is helping me on my path to enlightenment. I will become enlightened because of this stuff. And because of their unskillful actions, they will suffer. That is the truth of karma. So I should develop compassion and not anger. And Shantideva again says about this, really, it is I who are harmful to them and they who aid me. So why, slippery mind, do you turn it the wrong way around and become angry? And seeing this way, it helps me to not feel like a victim, not a helpless victim. I have agency, I have influence. My practice means there's always something positive I can do, take the next step, always something positive to do. Yeah, so that's my talk about practicing Kshanti during the hard times, during the dark, difficult days. That hard times can be an opportunity for spiritual development and growth and a move towards freedom. If we can learn to embrace adversity as an aid to practice, we can rely on the Dharma to be our light in the dark.